how could Yaakov Avinu, Yaakov our forefather, marry two sisters, Rachel and Leah, if the Torah forbids it? So that's the classic question. The classic answer is, well, it only forbade it in Vayikra, much later on in the Leviticus, in the third portion. We're in Bereshis, and therefore really it wasn't a biblical prohibition at the moment, and therefore there was no issue with Yaakov marrying two sisters. There are several major issues with that. The first issue let's lay down is that Rashi doesn't make any comment about there being an issue here. Generally, Rashi Rashi's commentary only happens is ruled, if that's the right word, by there are several rules which Rashi goes by when he makes a commentary. The first rule is if something doesn't make sense. If it doesn't make sense, then it depends. Then he'll make a commentary. Or if there's a question which needs to be asked, then he'll make a commentary. So first of all, Rashi makes no comment here, which means obviously no question. Or you could say, well, the second way Rashi doesn't make a rule, Rashi makes a commentary, is if the answer is obvious to a 5-year-old. Okay, well, what's so obvious here for a 5-year-old? So you could answer, well, it's very simple. The 5-year-old hasn't yet learned Parshas Vayikra, he doesn't know it's forbidden, and therefore he doesn't make any comment here. So the counter argument to that is, hang on. First of all, Rashi very clearly states, Im Lavan Garati. Well, the Torah says, Im Lavan Garati, and Rashi makes a commentary. What does it mean? Garati means that while Yaakov was with Lavan, he kept the 613 mitzvahs, of which forbidden relationships are one of those 613. So therefore, Yaakov obviously kept the 613 mitzvahs. So we come back to the original question: how could Yaakov marry two sisters? You could come along and give another answer. Hang on. The fact that the Ovots kept the Torah mitzvahs, which we are told that Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov kept the Torah mitzvahs, was only when they were in Eretz Yisrael. Yaakov was in Haran, which wasn't in Eretz Yisrael, and therefore there was no issue. Again, you come back to Im Lavan Garati. Rashi says, well, with Lavan, I kept all 613 mitzvahs. Therefore, how could he marry two sisters? There's also the Ramban. Ramban gives an answer that. What was the Ramban's answer? In a second, should I check this out first? Sorry, just finding the answer here. The Ramban's answer was that they were in Chor. So they were in Chor and they were outside Eretz Yisrael, and therefore he could marry two sisters. In fact, according to Rashi, it was actually 4 sisters. Bilhah and Zilpah were daughters from concubines of Lavan, and therefore they were also co-sisters, if that's right, or sister somethings. What? Half sisters. But they weren't even half sisters because they were from concubines. Yeah, still okay, fine. Biological half sisters.
The reference that he brings is the fact that was the reason why Rachel died. That's why on the way to Yisrael, because the problem was that married to two sisters, Yaakov was on the way to Yisrael.
So you couldn't have.
He couldn't have two sisters married to two sisters.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, but it's just the way he considered it like the rest of the Shaman.
Okay. You still have the issue is why doesn't Rashi make a comment? We still left at the end of the day is why doesn't Rashi make a comment on the fact that Yaakov was clearly Peshut Shel Mikra doing something. If Im Lavan Garati, if Lavan I was keeping 613 mitzvahs, even if you say I B'choron, still he said Im Lavan Garati, which means marrying 4 sisters.
The word Garati is not necessarily.
Rashi says it means Tariaq. He kept 613 mitzvahs. That's what I'm saying. Peshut Shel Mikra, though, very simply put, even the explanation, but in Choron there wasn't an issue, is still only not Peshut Shel Mikra. Peshut Shel Mikra, we still have an issue how Yaakov married 2 sisters.
No, the word Garati doesn't necessarily mean Tariaq because it was brought out, like it's more than Jewish.
Yeah, 100%.
This is not like
Correct. Correct. No, I'm not saying it is, but what I'm saying therefore is Kabalah and Superheros, we still have an issue then. Because Rashi, then for sure we have no explanation.
Yeah.
At least you could try and explain Im Lavan Garati. Well, Im Lavan Garati was strengthened. But then we still have the issue is, hang on, how could you marry 2 sisters? In fact, how could you marry 4 sisters? which is Rivka, Rochel, Leah, Rochel, Bilhah, and Zilpah. Once you start, so there's another issue that we have, and so there's another answer that potentially you could answer, and that is if Yaakov was, according to the explanation that in Lavan Garrity, that he was keeping the 613 mitzvahs, and therefore Rachel and Leah were members of Lavan's house, they had to convert to marry Yaakov, in theory. And therefore, if they were converting to marry Yaakov, it means that they were restarting completely their familial belonging. They would not necessarily be classified as halachic brothers and sisters. The argument to that is,
no. A child and a mother can marry if they both converted. I mean, from the Torah. If they both were going and they converted, they can marry.
Correct.
It's the Rabbanon that they made it that they can't marry.
So that's the application here, is that they converted here, and therefore, why not? It's not really, in theory, two sisters. The counter
Rabbanon made it.
The Rabbanon, but we're not even the Raisa. The Raisa hasn't even been given to Yaakov yet. So the counter argument to that is, hang on. First of all, Yaakov's concept of keeping Tariq mitzvahs was a personal chumrah. A personal chumrah can't be applied to anyone else except himself.
Yeah, but he declared it. He said, in love with God, which means I did it.
That was after he left.
Yes, he said, as a matter of fact, he became...
For himself.
For himself.
For himself, yeah. But that doesn't mean that his decision to keep the 630 mitzvahs would mean that everyone else has to convert for him. That doesn't mean the conversion for other people would work. So you can't say that the conversion, that because they married him, they converted. The concept of conversion didn't exist yet. The Jews or the tribal groups of Yaakov, of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov were on par with the Noahites, because there was no concept of Judaism. So you can't, so even if you say that the sisters were Noahites, there was no concept of conversion. So you can't say that it's as if they were not related. And second of all, the issue of marrying two sisters isn't related to conversion, not conversion. The issue of marrying two sisters is also the emotional trauma of two sisters fighting over one husband. So you still can't answer and say, oh well, they converted and therefore that eradicates everything. Well, no, they're still sisters. Nothing can remove that relationship they have with each other. So we're left at the very end is, how could Yaakov marry two sisters? So to answer it, you have to first clarify one thing. He didn't marry two sisters. He did marry two sisters. The issue wasn't the fact that he married Leah. The issue was he married Rachel. So the real question is, how could he marry Rachel? Marrying Leah was no problem. He was allowed to marry Leah. The question is, how could he then go and marry Rachel? We've already stated that Yaakov and the Avos, the other forefathers, took on certain chumrias for themselves. Stringencies. But those stringencies were purely chumrias for themselves, were zealous. It wasn't necessarily because God had commanded them to. Therefore we say that Abraham, even though he knew the concept of bris, only did the concept of bris when Hashem told him to. Why? Because Abraham still kept to the Noahide laws of don't shed any blood, which is don't murder, and therefore he wasn't going to give himself a bris until there was a commandment that overrode that, which is from Hashem to do a bris, which was at the age of 99. There's also we see elsewhere, not necessarily Pshuta Shemikra, but the idea that Yaakov was punished. What Yaakov was punished with Yosef leaving his family, Yosef leaving for 17 years, was a punishment for Yaakov. Not disobeying. Punishment for Yaakov disrespecting his father Yitzchak by leaving for 22 years, or for however long, 14 years. So we still see that even though the mitzvahs had not been commanded to them, or they still were bound by certain Noahites. What was one of the Noahites? Not Noahites. There's certain groups or certain masses of communities of the Noahide era took it upon themselves to keep certain chumras, and one of those chumras was do not lie. How do we know this? Because Lavan excuses himself to Yaakov, saying, "I did not lie." When it was discovered that Lavan had handed over Leah instead of Rachel, Lavan says, I didn't lie. It wasn't deception. It's our custom that we first marry off the eldest. Why was it necessary for Lavan to admit that, to try and excuse himself that he didn't lie? Because the Noahites, up until that point, the concept of lying was wrong. So the masses followed the law of do not lie, and therefore, by nature, Lavan wanted to explain, I didn't lie. So Yaakov now had a problem.
Sorry, but it was a non-sequitur that he gave. I didn't lie because it's a custom. He could have said, I lied because it was a custom. Therefore, it was necessary for me to do what I did.
Right.
But his because doesn't answer the issue of him lying. In fact,
No, it was a straight out lie.
it emphasizes the fact that he was lying.
Correct. But you see from him trying to excuse himself, shows there was this moral idea, well, I don't know if it's moral, the idea of not to lie. Oh no, well, no one disagrees that he lied. He was deceived. No one disagrees that. But the fact that you see Laban trying to excuse himself shows there was accepted amongst the civilized communities of that time is not to lie. So Yaakov now had a problem. He had already married Leah, but he had promised Rachel to also. The whole reason he worked for Laban was to marry Rachel, which means now he had lied to Rachel. Yes, he had been deceived by Laban, but he still had to fulfill the obligation now to marry Rachel.
It's not necessarily lying.
It was deception.
It was a delayed promise.
Well, it wasn't delayed because at that moment in time he wasn't going to marry Rachel. It's the fact that he now was going to have to go work further. So when he did marry Rachel, what was he actually keeping to? He was keeping to the accepted group, the accepted masses of do not deceive or keep your word. He had promised Rachel, he now had to fill his word of marrying Rachel. His own personal chumrah of Leitim Vayikra or of keeping permissive relationships, that was his own personal chumrah. Hashem had not commanded him yet, and therefore the standards of the community, which is do not lie, overrode his own personal chumrah of not marrying or keeping your word, overrode his personal chumrah of not marrying more than one sister. So basically the standards of the community overrode his own personal chumras, and that's why Rashi doesn't make any comment about it, because it was kind of obvious. There was no commandment not to marry two sisters, but because the Noahites and the society at that time kept to their word. By the fact that we see Lavan very clearly saying, I didn't lie, or trying to make as if he didn't lie, because they kept to the word. Therefore, Rashi didn't see a reason to actually make any commentary on it. So what does this mean to us? Well, it's obviously bring it back home, bring it to fast forward 3,500 years. How does this apply to us? We all have our own personal chumras. We all have our own personal ideologies, goals, where we try to be very machmir, or especially the Shloshim Chag, 30 days before the Chag, we're coming to the end of the new year, new resolutions are going to start happening, so to speak. We all try to improve ourselves, and we take on extra, be it physical resolutions, or come up with Yutes Kislev, which is more associated with Judaism, but Yutes Kislev, Rosh Hashanah Chassidus, where the idea is to take on perhaps more spiritual resolutions to yourself. The check you have to make, or the question you have to ask yourself, is by taking on those standards, physical resolution or secular resolutions or spiritual resolutions, is it a sacrifice to someone else? When you see someone else who is possibly drowning in spiritual issues or drowning in physical issues, you have to ask yourself, what I'm going to choose to do, or if the way I've chosen to live my life, which might not be based upon mitzvahs, but I've chosen to do a particular task, or chosen to live my life in a particular way, will it be a sacrifice? Will it cause an issue to those around me? At home you may say, I want to go out and learn 3 hours a night every single night, okay? But what about home? You might think that.